Hi, I am Kate, Prophet with the Planets, financial astrologer. I've been working on my 2023 forecast and I've seen some concerning astrology pertaining to the US. And I sort of decided that I might share this to the public, not as a financial forecast, but just looking at some astrology next year. There's some stuff that's concerning me. So, what I want to do is show you some of the stuff that I've been looking at. I don't know exactly what it is, but I've had this feeling before. And last time I had this feeling, it did turn out to be something not quite what I thought it was. So I want to give you a bit of a look. It's particularly to do with California. And as many people would know, there's going to be, here comes, I'm not used to putting my face out there. I'm in hot London, it's never hot here. But what I'm looking at is what I read is called the Great American Eclipse. I am going to say I don't know how great this is going to be. If you know astrology, we've obviously got the Pluto return going on, and we don't really know just exactly what a Pluto return can be about. Now, we've certainly seen a lot of quite shocking stuff, but this is October 2023 because I always start with eclipses when I go out to do my forecasts. And I was just tracking where they went. And look, I knew of this, but I think I sort of just lost a sense of time when it was. And so we have, this is what we call this really heavy black line. I'll show you just on the screen. It's called the central path, like the strongest part of the eclipse, okay? So this is literally going to pass right over, particularly the northern side and California. And that is by itself, okay, anything can happen. You know, we see a lot of global events when, you know, an eclipse passes over, but we can certainly not know what they're going to be. But when I put that Pluto return with it, and it's not just about that, I'm going to go somewhere with this. It is kind of worrying to me. And look, I want to just make clear, I didn't really know what to do with this kind of, you know, this thing I've seen. And I messaged my good friend Jessica Adams. I said, what do I do? Because I've seen this, and do I say something? She's like, look, you know, you do put that out. You just pass the message on. I want to say, I don't know exactly what this is. It's not to say it's going to be something, but there's some really, really, and I'm just going to use the word intense astrology, particularly to do with California, I want to show you. And I'm sort of combining this with the eclipse path and this really central path of the eclipse. And it's going to pass through South America and down this Mexico. And look, I do know California is a mess. I have a lot of American clients. I have friends that live there. I have friends that are getting out. I don't know exactly what's going on. I think it takes someone, American and a citizen, to really understand what's going on there. So I'm the first to say I don't quite understand the current situation of living there, and a lot of people fleeing and tax and all that sort of stuff. But this sort of feels something a bit different. Now, the last time I got a weird feeling about California, and I did think it would be some disaster, the fires came. So it's not like I've not had this feeling before. But I'm going particularly just, only on astrology. So what I want to do is show the astrology. Do have a make up your own mind. But I think it's a little intense. And I'm putting this is not really going to go financial, but, most people know me as a financial astrologer with my Prophet of the Planets business. And I do think there is going to be some kind of effect. Now, interestingly, I did put on my blog, Prophet with the Planets website, kind of about the housing market and where we have seen historically a top in the housing market, which was what we say the nodes going to late stage Aries. Now, I went back because I was consulting with a client and I was mentioning this astrology, and I realized that that was for starting July 2023. And I don't know if there's some kind of, is this the thing that creates the event? Look, I don't know. So I just want to show the astrology, and I just want to make clear I'm not here to kind of do a doomsday forecast, but astrologers are messengers and stuff, and you can make your own lines. There's ways we can kind of have a look. It's like I always say astrology is like Pluto, but the charts are showing me something. And I don't know what it is, but as I'm going to show you this, it's not sort of astrology we see a lot. And I'm going to say it'd be pretty unusual to not have something of this. So I'm just going to take it step by step. So this is the path of the eclipse crossing over. I'm just going to say, look, that we do have that sort of San Andreas fault line. I'm not saying it's an earthquake. I do slightly lean that way. I'll go there later. Look, I don't know though. The astrology cannot tell you exactly what it's going to be. And I have looked up some kind of astrology for that, and I can't specifically see that. So I want to make it really clear. I'm not saying that, but I feel like there's something. So let's have a look. So this is like to zoom in here where the eclipse comes, and it's going to be really strong. Now it can go on either side of these lines, but the strongest path, the central path, is through there. This is October 2023. I am doing this miles ahead of time. And I'm going to show you, it could even stretch to early 2024. It could even, whatever this is, start coming as early as March 2023. And I'll show you why. But I'll just say, with a Pluto return, and this alone, that would not be enough for me to go, okay, there may be some, I don't know, I'll show you what it is. It's really, really, really unusual, okay? So what I'm going to show you, I want to show you a chart. So I ran some charts specific to this area, and I've done California, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Now, as soon as I saw this, I was like, okay, this is weird, because what we have here is Uranus and Pluto. Why they're red is they're retrograde. They're what we say conjunct. They are really, really strong here together, and they're at 29 degrees of Aries. And what we have is an eclipse, and I'm just going to quickly bring it up on my chart. Bear with me for one moment. That in April 2023, and I'll just flip that so I can show you separately, we are going to have an eclipse at 29 degrees Aries. Now, 29 degrees is considered a critical degree in astrology. Now, this is Aries, Mars rules Aries, the god of war, and I'm not saying there's going to be a war here, but it's a pretty intense energy, what we call a critical degree. Now, that eclipse is square Pluto. I think I've mentioned this quite a bit. I'm not a fan of this eclipse on social media. We would also take it to 0 Taurus because it's like half a degree off, but it's really 29.5 degrees of Aries. So when we add it, put it on top of the California chart, and there's something there too, not just this, it gets a little intense because this eclipse is exactly going to what we say conjunct this Pluto-Uranus conjunction. Now, that in itself, just whether it be a person, event, country, would think that there's probably something pretty shocking, I guess we could say, it's quite intense unto itself just to have that. We have Saturn conjunct Neptune. I don't even worry about all these small transits because this is the big stuff. When we have a solar eclipse, Saturn, Pluto, any eclipse at exact degree, you're going to feel really strongly anyway. And then you may need a little bit of astrology knowledge to this, maybe some terminology. And then I looked at the transit. So at the very top, this is the eclipse. Now, where this is quite intense, also what we say opposite the moon and opposite Venus. But what's going to happen? Pluto, the Pluto return, the US, okay? I'll just point out too that Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius right when this eclipse happens. So we're probably going to see all these sort of events, whether they be market, world events. Pluto changing signs is a big deal. We don't really have much of any history on this, so we don't really know quite what that's going to be about. Now, and my good friend Jessica Adams says it's about the friends in the group. It could be about virus. Pluto rules viruses. I don't know. But it is going to go to 0 degrees Aquarius, and we'll probably see something of that nature. Okay, but it gets specific to California a little odd. Well, not odd, but this is some really intense astrology. Because what's going to happen, whilst Pluto goes to 0 degrees Aquarius, it's 1 degree away from that eclipse at 29 as far as just using degree theory. It is going to square the natal moon. So that on the left is Pluto making a transit. It moves very slowly, so this is going to go for quite a while. We're coming in pretty tight here. Pluto square Venus, Pluto square Uranus. Let me just mark them out. So Pluto square the moon, Pluto square Venus, Pluto square Uranus, Pluto square Pluto, Pluto square the ascendant, Pluto square the ascendant. Now this is the sort of more what I'm really seeing and going, whoa, what's going on? You may have heard me say, what is going on in the forecast I did with a market crash, and we certainly crashed. And I have that same feeling here that I had looking at that astrology, and now I have what is going on here too. Now, this is a really, what we say, tight square. It's just coming, but what we say, it's just separating, but Pluto moves so slowly. That is still, we're almost right there then. So we have a solar eclipse conjunct Pluto-Uranus, Pluto squaring Pluto-Uranus, even just Pluto square Pluto, a Pluto return of the USA. Now, this is not the eclipse I showed you making the path. Okay, this is the one coming first in April, right? That eclipse unto itself, I'm only going to, for 2 seconds, say something to do with the financial stuff, because if you watched my forecast for last year, our crash pattern is Uranus between Saturn and Pluto, or Uranus is between Pluto conjunct the eclipse and Saturn. So I don't like the marks. This is not a market video. This is going to be a bit whoa, I think. You know, it's a very rare pattern, and it came in 1929, 1979, 2022, and here it is back again. I'm talking about 9 months away here. This is quite a lot, okay? And it doesn't really just finish here. So I want to show two things. What I want to first show is I might just show you, just for context specific, because I really do think this is, I haven't, and I will just say I have not looked at the east coast of America. I'll show you the USA chart in a sec, okay? But this is the California chart. Now, if I do what we call those maps and I add the, I'm going to add some lines to it that we can do when sometimes you see, let me just quickly add the lines in here. There we go. Okay, so let me just quickly pop this on the screen, which is a terrible habit I forget to do. So the eclipse is this big heavy black line at the top. Now, let me just pop the cities in too. It is, look, I don't know if this is a thing, but it is going to cross Pluto. I'm not going to get into the cities because I don't want to put like a fear-mongery thing into anyone. I might try and make it a bit bigger here. And it doesn't necessarily mean that exact city because it's quite a wide stretch. But the point is the planets. So I don't know if you can see where my mouse is, but where the black and the dark red meet at the top is Pluto. And then with the blue where it comes down to the right is actually Uranus. And then it will only cross Mars later. I think, let's have a quick look, the path. Yeah, so, but it's only going to cross, excuse me, that Pluto Uranus. So it's just, I don't know, you know, that's quite intense. So I don't know. But anyway, let's have a look at some other astrology. And I want to show you that eclipse a little more anyway, okay? And I would prefer whoever's watching this to just be, because again, I don't want to go, oh, there's going to be an earthquake or there's going to be, I kind of think there may be, but I don't know. I'm just seeing something and it's really hard for me to put a kind of, because, you know, it was fires last time and it may not be. I just want to make that really, really clear, okay? But it just feels like when I put that other astrology, there's something coming along, and I'll get into it a little bit more because it's not just that. Now, this is the eclipse at 21 degrees of Libra that is coming across the US. The best part about this is that, trying to find an upside, the planets that can trigger eclipses along the way early aren't actually coming along to September. Now, eclipses can show up a month before anyway, so I'm not certainly getting these warnings of like, oh, okay, we could have a trigger, you know, in 6 months or something. Oh, you know, that's the other eclipse. Or let's say in 6 weeks, I should say, okay? Now, at the timing of this eclipse, Saturn is going, you know, what we call retrograde at 0 Pisces, but Pluto here is at 27 degrees. Now, if you know astrology, you would know what this is straight away. And if not, what that is that it is the Pluto of the USA at 27 degrees Capricorn, exact degree. So what that means, as that eclipse passes over, it is the exact final pass of the last, I think it's the last one, the Pluto 2023. This is going on for a long time, but it's the final pass because it's gone forwards, backwards, forwards again as it moves on, okay? It's right there at the time. But I say that Pluto brings its message 2 degrees away, so there's no rule to say that, you know, the minute this comes, then, you know, well, but, you know, it's a lot of astrology going on here. Now, we're also going to have the eclipses at 21 degrees of Libra. It will conjunct the Saturn in the 10th house. I'm pretty like this chart I know fairly well. The countries, I don't know the times. Some of them I've got, but this chart I'm pretty happy with. So, you know, we are going to have the Saturn eclipsed as well. And even into that in itself is a lot. Okay, but you know, so we're going to have this last Pluto return and a Saturn eclipse. So this is for the whole of the US, right? Just to quickly, you know, do a sort of more complete astrology, what we're going to have as well, we have what's called a progress chart, and that's like looking at where the chart that we're looking at is in time. Now, this Saturn is going to get eclipsed here, October 2022, but that can be anything. And just Saturn eclipses aren't fun, but USA is going through so much. I don't even think you would know what's going on there, But that eclipse will then conjunct the Mars. That eclipse path is going over that Mars line, and Mars is a pretty aggressive planet. It's in the second house of finances. Now, Mars eclipses can be pretty, we had the US dollar pull out of a massive low about 2 years ago from that, but this is where it gets a little different because, Mars does rule all these things to do with kind of like not environmental, but Uranus is the earthquake. I want to make that clear. Pluto is shocks, and it's like whoa, and then Mars is a trigger of earthquakes, and sorry, not just earthquakes, but a trigger of eclipses. But Mars can be pretty fiery and intense. Now we've got Pluto conjunct the south node. You need to know astrology to understand that, so don't worry too much about that. I'm trying to make this, as I get told that people kind of trying to make it as basic, but yet we have to talk about the astrology as I can, okay? So and then what we're going to have is Mars, as I said, can trigger eclipses, will actually trigger this progressed Saturn anyway, and this can go all the way into October 2023 anyway. So it's quite a bit going on. Now, if I go back to the California chart, and I've been playing with a lot, so excuse me if I don't kind of get this right the first time. And I was looking at the progressed charts of, California, and here's that Uranus, Pluto, they've gone direct. So they're working a lot stronger now. When planets are retrograde, they're a little weak, and evolutionary astrology has a lot to do with the retrograde stuff. But, so they're kind of there. And even Saturn's along there around that Aries too. Now, if I so I have two lots of dates for California and San Francisco. For San Francisco and Los Angeles. They are very similar, because they all were founded, I guess you would say, around that same time. So some of them will be the same as the US and stuff, and you're going to see a lot of the same setups and stuff. So this is one of the LA charts I've got, and one of them, if I progress it, let's have a look. Just bear with me for one sec. Let me start with San Francisco, then I'll do LA. So this chart is going to have that same sort of dates as what we looked before, around that sort of 1850, but have a look at this. Here it is again. Uranus, Pluto conjunction Sun, all within 4 degrees of the degree of that eclipse. So here we go again with that sort of same astrology setup. What we're going to have, there's two, this gets a bit more interesting, is because, let me just quickly bring the eclipse. Sorry, I've looked at so many charts, it's dropped down. Right, so here's the eclipse at the top. And look, Jupiter is there, and usually Jupiter going over here would be fantastic. So I am going to put that out there, but the eclipse over Pluto Uranus is kind of the biggest part. Jupiter is not at these planets. Look, maybe Jupiter will lighten it up. Look, I don't know. I just want to talk about the eclipse. So what we're going to have is it's going to conjunct Pluto, Uranus, and the Sun. And what I will say, even if it's not anything of a natural major event or something, looking at this, anything that's had the sun eclipse will usually not be the same again in a couple of years. Now, this is only specific to San Francisco, so there will be some change of some nature from 2023, and things need to change, and it's not anything to do with what I'm looking at. There will be some kind of change, but we are having the sun eclipse, Pluto, Uranus. Okay, so this is the one in April. It's not the one where the eclipse has not passed over America yet. But what happens is that we are also then going to have the other eclipse, that is the path that comes over. Let me just quickly bring that up, because what's going to happen is that is going to oppose these placements. So an eclipse opposite the sun, that can be a little, not amazing, but it certainly wouldn't relate specifically solely to what I just showed you before. But it is going to oppose Pluto, oppose Uranus, oppose the Sun. Look, Jupiter at this point will have finished going over, so look, I don't know. But you're also going to have Mars opposite Pluto, Mars opposite Uranus. It's a lot of astrology, and they will share the similar astrology to what I showed you from the USA chart, because it's all 1850. So again, the same thing. Pluto square Pluto exact. Pluto square Uranus. Let me just quickly highlight that. So Pluto square Pluto, Pluto square Uranus, Pluto square the Sun. Let's just add another one here. Pluto, square Mercury. And then Mars opposite Pluto. Okay, Mars opposite Uranus, Mars opposite Venus, Mars has opposed the Sun. it's all, and I think I forgot to point out before, Uranus is squaring the nodes on top of it, okay? I think I did forget to put that out. And you even have the nodes squaring again, if you don't understand that, don't worry too much. But this is a lot. This is like, there's actually not really any, bit later after there will be, but there's some, Saturn sextile Pluto, but, the squares are in control here, and the conjunctions of the eclipse and the oppositions, so here's even Pluto conjunct the descendant, something to do with someone else, and I have to say the worst transit of my life. Doesn't mean that's more personal astrology, but that has been happening anyway, so don't worry too much about that. But there's a lot of heavy astrology here, and if I go to the LA chart, you're going to get a fairly similar of 1850, a fairly similar setup. Okay, you're going to have that same little kind of what we call a stellium, Pluto, Uranus, Venus, etc. So you're going to have exactly this, pretty much the same thing that I talked about before. You're going to have that eclipse coming over, and opposite as well, and you're even going to have what we call the south node passing over here over LA. Again, the same thing where you've got Pluto conjunct it's actually stationing over the descendant. Oh god, this is even what's going on there now. Oh my god, if I could write a book about this transit. For me, it probably needs to get off about 2 degrees away. So this whole sort of into 2022, any Pluto that stations near what we call an angle, it's in your life anyway, So, and then what I want to do is just show you one other date I've got, and they're both kind of giving different pictures, but they're both telling some weird kind of story. So bear with me for a minute. Right, now this is a chart of 1776, 1850, miles away. So it's a little bit like the USA chart where we've got this Pluto again as well. So even San Francisco, for example, here, because Pluto moves so slow, I'm just going to point out you are going to see that. That's happening right now because that's what's happening in the US. But let me just quickly pop one of those eclipses like in 2023 over it. So you do get a bit of a different picture. So there's that eclipse coming over in October 2023. You get a slightly different picture here with the other planets. So there is quite a big deal, but you do have Uranus semi-square the sun. Uranus square the sun is whatever the chart's about. So in this example, Uranus is is San Francisco, okay? And but it does show a slightly different picture, but we have Mars square Pluto. Now, if I take this chart, I'm pretty sure this was the chart that I progressed. Hang on a sec. I think it's the other one. Hang on. Oh, by the way, there's that Saturn again. Bear with me for 1 minute. So this is the LA chart. Okay, so we have Pluto at 4 degrees Aquarius, and eventually when Pluto gets moving into Aquarius, at some point he'll go to 4 degrees. It's going to be quite a bit later. Here we've got the nodes around this degree of that eclipse in early 2023. What that means, it's sort of to do with, and look at those nodes right on top of each other. So this is what's known as the prenatal postnatal eclipse. It's where the nodes meet up as the same series of eclipses when this was founded. So there's sort of a little, I wouldn't say karmic in relation to what's going on here, but it's quite an important eclipse, I guess is what I'd say. Okay. Again, you're going to have a really different story with the transits. You will have Saturn square the ascendant and the descendant, Uranus opposite Jupiter here. It's not really. And then you're going to have Pluto square the nodes, okay? But what happens where it gets quite interesting too? Now, that eclipse will square Mars. There's a lot of Mars coming into this, but when you progress this is quite interesting because what happens, okay? The progressed chart, and if you know astrology, you might be able to see this T-square with all these 0 degrees, Saturn, Uranus. Now, they're two pretty heavy planets, and we've got Venus too. Now, Venus was coming up, actually, it doesn't really matter, but it certainly was being eclipsed before with a lot of these other, charts we looked at. And we just point out that the LA has had an eclipse on the sun, so all these changes going on in LA will be quite different anyway, probably in a couple of years. Or at least in 12 months, and there's a lot of change. We have an eclipse on the sun, it starts a process. So it's a little separate to what I'm talking about here, but it's certainly quite a big astrology transit unto itself. But what we have is this 0 degree T-square, okay? And you can see it in this chart. So Venus is not happy. Pluto is square, has been square the sun. Uranus is right, exactly opposite Saturn. Uranus opposite Jupiter. Uranus square mean. So Uranus is not happy. Now Uranus is a very underused planet. Not underused, underspoken about planet. It really needs a lot of study with Uranus because it's a really big one and it can do a lot of the work, at least particularly in the finance stuff anyway. But generally, it really doesn't get enough. It's not. It's like 50-50 surprise or like, oh my god, it's kind of like that really extreme of the other way. But when we put some of these eclipses in, and I want to bring up the one that had Pluto going to 0 degrees of Aquarius, 29th of April 2023. Now Pluto will conjunct the moon. The moon is the public, but it doesn't even have to aspect. The fact when Pluto moves to 0 degrees, thanks to Jessica Adams who's taught me this, is that, any chart with a lot of placements of it, when you've got a really intense astrology like transit like this, will pick this up, okay? So that T-square could even be set off, and it's going between the 11th, the ruler of Aquarius, the 5th and the 8th. Something to do with the group again. It's interesting. I'm going to point out something else quite interesting in a minute too, which is a side note to this that I've been thinking about talking to clients last few days. We do have, LA has some pretty intense astrology, just separate again, and that's even going to come in early 2023. Now, looking at that later eclipse, right, I really am. I just want to say I am focusing towards that end of the year, and I even am looking at the 5 Libra because I don't have enough time to do that here, but a lot of these charts were starting to show up progressed suns around 5 Libra, Venus around 5 Libra, stuff like that. But when we have this eclipse at 21 degrees of Libra, there's a lot of people of my age, anyone's from sort of early 40s, mid 40s to 50s will have their Pluto eclipse. That's sort of 1970, 1985, 1970, 1975, because everyone has Pluto around these degrees. And I've been sort of thinking, I wonder what a generational eclipse like that will entail. How does a giant Pluto transit to us in Libra? And Libra is, rules quite a different things, but there's definitely some sort of social element and stuff too. But it's not even to do with it, just about the planet. What happens when like a whole generations of people and decades of people have their Pluto eclipse? And it's, Pluto eclipses can mean a lot. You can certainly get power. It can be one of the worst things for you. You have this, all the things through Scorpio, sex, death, transformation, death, taxes, and I can't help but wonder whether this effect of whatever happens here will affect all these people in a Plutonian way. It's a really interesting one because certainly something like this hasn't happened in quite a while, okay? So there's a little bit of a weird extra element as far as astrology here, and so I think about it, like maybe do a lot of that. Is that the generation that maybe owns homes or something comes up? I don't know, because I want to be really careful not to put the sort of what's it like, the doomsday forecast, but as the job as an astrologer, just to show what we see, because you can be prepared. So this is a lot of the astrology I'm looking at. It is really late, and what I would say to do, people say, well, what do I do? And please don't freak out and stuff like that, but because it may not be this. But what I would do, particularly if I lived around here, I would start watching those reports. When we had Mars moving to the degree of the eclipse that we just had, I certainly did take a look because I'd already started my I'd clocked this about a day after. So I had a look, and I'm happy to say there is a little bit. There's certainly some, but I don't know what's normal for people to come in, and I don't really know what's normal because there's some interesting YouTube. There's a little thing that clocks the the graph. But if it were me, I'd be putting alerts on my phone just to be safe. And this is what we do: do your insurances, check your stuff, just to be safe. And the best thing with these big astrology charts, if nothing comes of them, or we sound like we're all really worst case scenario, at least you are over prepared. And I can't say it all like this, but with me, we're not over prepared for Mercury retrograde, and I turn up an hour early and I end up sitting around for an hour. But that's what I would do from here, okay? And just pay attention to the news. Don't run up and leave because I don't know. And you know, Pluto just moving here, is it early or late? We could certainly not say. I do think there will be something going on early 2023. You know, the other thing too, we are going to have Uranus, you know, particularly around that late stage. It is getting pretty late in the piece, you know, but what I would do, any kind of back, you know, anything that I would want to make sure where the servers are and they're backup servers. I mean, most people have backup servers these days, but I would want them to be somewhere else because it could be, again, it could be a fire or something, you know, but so I would just be doing all that kind of stuff. It's making it very hard for me to make a 2023 forecast because I don't know what's going to be in people's lips at this time. You know, obviously now it's all really crypto and the dollar and, you know, because if something like this happens, both would be affected. And I was watching a really interesting one of these sort of people that does a lot of videos, and they're like, which will it be, the dollar or the crypto? It could be both. Look, I don't know, you know. So I'm certainly making some plans to do with all these Saturn eclipses and, you know, I've mentioned before, I'm a bit of a dollar bull, and, you know, I'm kind of putting all this into my sort of thing. But so I just really want to point that out. What I will say, I know people want to go chase this eclipse. I would not to be doing. That's one thing I would not be doing, is chasing this eclipse. Watch it on TV. It's awesome. You know, light up and watch it. It's really great fun. But don't, this is not one and I know it's a once in however long, but with that astrology coming across, look, it is more April 2023, don't get me wrong, I showed you a lot of that stuff, but we certainly have these progressed charts. I would not be chasing it, you know, and kind of maybe sit it out. But I don't want to ruin the dream for anyone. But that's just some of the astrology I'm looking at. I feel I need to kind of put it out there. I'd love some other astrologers are probably a lot better than this. Oh, I will just quickly mention one thing. The tsunami back in Japan of 2011. Now, what that was is that you had Uranus at 29 degrees of Pisces, 29 degrees critical degree. Okay, what do we have as this eclipse? Now, it's certainly quite different. Uranus changing signs, like Pluto changing signs, but Pluto's changing signs around this sort of 29, you know, and we did have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction about a year before that. Okay, when we get to later 2023 and even into 2024, I guess, where I was sort of looking at some of these 5-degree Libra eclipses, that and where we are starting to see some of these planets eclipsed, that's the eclipse there, okay. We do have the Uranus-Jupiter. Jupiter expands what it touches. Uranus does rule things like earthquakes, stuff like that. Pluto is at 1 Aquarius, so this could be, we certainly don't have 29 degrees here, but we have had Mars at 29 degrees Pisces about 2 days before. And that can keep things going. I mean, you're talking about a different stretch of water again. It does slightly need to be bigger astrology, but we also have Neptune at 27 degrees of Pisces. That'll be at 29. I have made a video on tsunami and 29 degrees. 29 degrees Pisces is interesting because 1 degree Aries is called the Aries point, and that's actually a very critical degree in astrology charts anyway. Okay, and we did see that little crash recently when Jupiter went to 1 Aries. You know, it's called the Aries point. So this 29 Pisces, and my forecast for last year, I did point out, you know, there's a bit to do with these sort of Pisces degrees. So that's just something to think of. And again, I'm not saying that, but there is certainly some synergy a little bit with this, you know, sort of some of this stuff. So let's just hope it is just the city. I mean, I don't want to say hope, you know, but let's just hope it's just a things where, it just has to change and someone goes, right, this is it, this is where we change. Look, I don't know, you know, I'm not a resident in the US, so it's really hard for me. But, you know, I'd love some other astrologers to chime in. You know, the more the better, I think. Like I said with the crash astrology, the more the better that come in and have some say and we have dialogues, the better. You know, so, but just keep an eye out and get your spidey senses going, and you know, a bit of planning and preparing wouldn't be the worst thing. So, you know, maybe I hope this has helped. Some also interesting to someone. I don't know. Don't hate me if nothing happens. It's just we see something, we kind of see what we're seeing. And thank you for watching. Bye.